Yes, that's what I thought. Can I take a look? Yep. What it looks like? Nope. Is there a way that you're able to zoom in and not get the green? Closer.
You can move closer.
Yep.
Yeah.
We gotta move closer. All you're looking at is the green. That's fine. Hi, everyone. We will now begin our program with the invocation.
Heavenly Father, thank you for your presence today with us. And thank you for your presence with the victims of communism in all the world, with the victims of communism in China, Vietnam, North Korea, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Peru, Cuba. Thank you because you crying today with us here. And we are crying with you. But thank you because your justice comes. Thank you. In the name of Jesus. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today here at the Victims of Communism Memorial. My name is Andrew Brember, and I am the new president and CEO of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. We are gathered here today for the 14th annual Roll Call of Nations ceremony and the presentation of the Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom, VOC's highest honor. The Roll Call of Nations takes place on the anniversary of President Reagan's speech at the Brandenburg Gate. Just as the former president challenged Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall, we are reminded of the importance of tearing down the tyrannical walls of communist regimes around the world, specifically today, the Chinese Communist Party. The work of the foundation would not be possible without many supporters who are joining us today, both in person and virtually. I would especially like to thank our gold sponsors, the Honorable Jim Burnley, Mr. and Mrs. Andy and Rebecca Hagelin, Ambassador William Mindendorf, the Honorable Don Ritter, and our good friends at Good Comma Editing. We are grateful for your commitment to this foundation's mission. I would also like to thank the members of our bipartisan Victims of Communism Caucus and other members of Congress who continue to support this vital cause. I would also like to welcome the ambassadors and dignitaries who are here in person to lay wreaths at the memorial, and the dozens of partner organizations joining us virtually. Thank you for your presence and your support. The Roll Call of Nations is an annual ceremony honoring the more than 100 million victims who have been killed by communism. It is also an important opportunity to speak up and stand for the more than 1 billion people around the world who still live and suffer under communist regimes. This ceremony reminds us that the millions of men, women, and children who continue to lose their rights, their dignity, and too often their lives, we must remain vigilant and remain committed to a future free from the false hope of communism. Today, we honor, in particular, a man who has demonstrated the great courage in the face of communism. Jimmy Lai of Hong Kong, the recipient of this year's Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom, has continuously spoken out against the Chinese Communist Party's crimes and cruelties at great risk to himself and his family's well-being. He has advocated for the freedoms of people of Hong Kong and has condemned the multitude of crimes and abuses inflicted upon the Chinese people throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. As we speak today, Mr. Lai is in prison and is being accused and tried for his involvement in the 2019 and 2020 pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. How fitting is it that we're all with umbrellas here today? A longtime champion of freedom of speech and free markets, Mr. Lai is viewed as a threat to the coercive objectives of the Chinese government and its collaborators in Hong Kong. His imprisonment is evidence of the Chinese Communist Party's desire and ability to silence its critics. Hong Kong's people have seen their freedoms and way of life repressed and suffocated since its handover to the PRC in 1997. The small but determined city has had to fend off the CCP's slow and steady encroachment as leaders in Beijing undermine Hong Kong's autonomy and freedom at every turn. Sadly, since the handover, the CCP has gradually sliced away Hong Kong's rule of law and autonomy, relying on a strategy that seeks to undermine the people's rule and empower Beijing's loyalists and fellow travelers. The CCP has chosen to violate its international agreements and broken its promises of one country, two systems. From the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre to forced organ harvesting to the current Uyghur genocide, the Chinese Communist Party has inflicted atrocity after atrocity upon its people, and in Hong Kong, on the mainland, and increasingly even abroad. The people of Taiwan are in rightly fear of their own freedom and ability to maintain their way of life from violent threats and acts of aggression. Just as President Reagan boldly spoke the truth decades ago to the tyranny of the Soviet Union, the international community must continue to denounce these abuses, to resist the CCP, and make their injustices known around the world. We must continue to work together using every resource we can to ensure that beacons of freedom like Hong Kong and heroes like Jimmy Lai do not fall captive to communism. Thank you for joining us today as we commemorate those who have suffered and still suffer and have died under communism. And we stand with those fighting for freedom around the globe. Thank you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lee Edwards. I am the Chairman Emeritus of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Some 14 years ago, President George W. Bush dedicated this memorial, except the weather was a little more cooperative that day. The president said that in the 20th century will be remembered as the deadliest century in human history. But he pointed out, until our memorial, the nation's capital had no monument to the victims of imperial communism, an ideology that took the lives of more than 100 men, women, and children. Beyond and behind that staggering number of 100 million, Mr. Bush said, are the human stories of individuals with families and dreams whose lives were cut short by tyrants who knew no limit to their pursuit of power. Some of those individuals are well known, like Raoul Wallenberg, who saved 100,000 Jews from the Nazis, only to be arrested on Stalin's orders and sent to Moscow's infamous Lubyanka prison, where he disappeared without a trace. Some are less known, but are no less worthy of remembrance, like the courageous Polish priest, Father Jerzy Pawluska, who made his Warsaw church a sanctuary for the Solidarity Underground. For his defense of freedom, Father Jerzy was kidnapped, beaten, tortured, and his body dumped into the Vistula River by the secret police. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, many, too many, were the victims of the Gulag and the Laogai and the Isle of Pines and the tiger cages. So many stories, like the innocent Ukrainians who starved to death in the Holodomor, and the Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians who were jammed in the cattle cars and deported to Arctic death camps. The Cambodians slain in Pol Pot's killing fields, the Poles massacred in the Katyn forest, the Ethiopians slaughtered in Mengistu's Red Terror. We will never know the names of all who perished, but at this sacred place, communism's victims will be consecrated to history and remembered forever. And their stories will be told, if I may make mention of it, at the Victims of Communism Museum, now under construction at the corner of McPherson Square, just 2 blocks from the White House. And we hope to have a preview showing of the museum later this year under the title of our first exhibition, which is Remember Us. Remember Us. Well, there's only one possible response from us who live in freedom. We solemnly pledge that we will remember you. We vow that we will never forget the 100 million victims who died under communism, nor will we forget the 1.5 billion people who live, but not by their choice, under the communist regimes of China, North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, and Cuba. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot rest. We must not rest until those nations and their peoples are no longer captive, but free of communism. We look forward to that day, closer than the communist bosses realize, when communism is where it belongs, on the ash heap of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee Edwards, our founding chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Ed Fulner. I have the great honor of having succeeded Lee Edwards as chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And it's my very, very great pleasure to be able to be here today participating in this very important and symbolic effort to remember those more than 100 million victims of communism. Our Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom to the victims is the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation's highest honor. It's awarded to those individuals and institutions who have demonstrated a lifelong commitment to freedom and democracy in opposition to communism and all other forms of tyranny. Today, we are proud to present our Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom to Jimmy Lai for his lifelong commitment to freedom and democracy in Hong Kong, his dogged opposition to communism and its manifest forms of tyranny, as well as his determination to fight the CCP's authoritarian actions, no matter what the personal cost. We've all heard of Mr. Lai's heroic actions in the face of the brutal crushing of dissent in Hong Kong. The Chinese Communist Party's actions tell the world that there is no room for the slightest bit of toleration of even the smallest amount of personal freedom by any individual. And while the light of liberty in Hong Kong gets dimmer with each passing day, the bravery of Jimmy Lai and many other citizens of Hong Kong tell us that so long as the animating spirit of democracy burns within the souls of heroes like Jimmy Lai, the Chinese Communist Party will never truly control Hong Kong. What drives a person to dedicate his life to oppose tyranny? For Jimmy Lai, it was the publication of The Road to Serfdom by the late Nobel laureate Professor Friedrich Hayek, who inspired Jimmy to fight for freedom. His business ventures, Giordano, the Asian clothing retailer, Next Digital, the Hong Kong listed media company that he founded, and the popular newspaper Apple Daily are strong depictions of his advocacy and his high-profile support for the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement that has been so viciously condemned by the Chinese government. Jimmy was the leader of Hong Kong's 2014 umbrella movement. Currently, he's being accused and tried for his involvement in the 2019-2020 pro-democracy movement. Following the most recent protests, Jimmy was arrested on suspicion of, and I quote, collaborating with foreign forces. A charge that Beijing was able to bring against him because of their new national security law that they've imposed on Hong Kong by the Communist Party leaders in Beijing. The plight of Hong Kong is tragic, but it is at these moments of darkness that we learn how strong the human spirit can be. Jimmy Lai has shown the world just how strong his yearning is for the right to make his own life decisions. On behalf of all of us at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, we thank Mr. Lai for his courageous efforts for freedom and for everything he's done to enrich us all around the world, as well as for the people of Hong Kong. I'm going to present the medal to Jimmy's longtime friend, the Honorable Bill McGurn, who is the deputy editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal, former assistant to the President of the United States, and a former longtime resident of Hong Kong. So Bill, if you would come up, I would like to present the Truman Reagan medal. Here we are. To you. And there it is. We'll have the appropriate ribbons attached to it in due course together with the certificate. But Bill, we thank you for your willingness to accept it on Jimmy's behalf. And thank you for coming down from New York to be with us here today. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It's really a great honor to be able to accept this award on behalf of my friend and brother, Jimmy Lai. For those who may not be familiar with Jimmy, he's a Hong Kong entrepreneur who founded two of its leading publications, Next Magazine and Apple Daily. He's in prison today for a simple reason. Those publications tell the truth about China and Hong Kong today, and truth is the one thing communism cannot tolerate. My relationship with Jimmy is both professional and personal. Though we're both newspapermen and share a love for the writings of Friedrich Hayek, Jimmy is also my godson. He was baptized shortly before the British returned Hong Kong to China in 1997. This will become important in a moment. But this award is fitting for two main reasons. The first is that Jimmy is a reminder that the cost of communism, horrible as they have been, did not end with the collapse of the Soviet Union, though the fall of the Berlin Wall was a great advance for human freedom. The crushing of Hong Kong we are now seeing reminds us that communism depends on lies to sustain itself. And the hard men in Beijing prove that communism has always been less about what kind of economic arrangement a nation has than about the power it's requiring. In other words, it has less to do with Marx than Lenin. The second reason this award is so fitting is that this goddess of democracy is a replica of the statue Chinese students first raised at Tiananmen Square in 1989. This is the image Jimmy keeps in his heart as a sign of his hope and his faith that freedom will ultimately triumph. You have to remember that Jimmy is a man who has willingly exchanged the life of a multimillionaire for that of a Chinese dissident. He chose handcuffs and chains when he could have easily fled abroad to one of his many residences. And he did so in solidarity with the nameless thousands of his fellow Hong Kongers who have been arrested simply for demanding what we in the free world too often take for granted. They could not do so if they didn't believe that one day the people of China, not just Hong Kong, will claim their rightful freedom. I mentioned that Jimmy is my godson. I should also mention that his wife, Teresa, is an incredibly strong woman. She has told him, Jimmy, I am your wife. I knew this day was always a possibility, and I will walk this path with you every step of the way. But you must pick up your cross and you must embrace it. And guess what? This strong, proud man does exactly what she says, because Jimmy and Teresa each trust the other absolutely, the way two people in a marriage should. It's a terrible, awesome thing to witness. My friends, I've gone on a little too long. Jimmy would want me to thank you for this honor. Teresa would add the only thing she adds whenever people ask, what can they do to help? She would say, pray. Finally, both Jimmy and Teresa would want me to tell you that as overwhelmed as they are by the honor you've given them, please, please do not forget the many, many others in Hong Kong and China who are facing the same threat as Jimmy with the same grace and courage, but who go unnoticed and unheralded by the world because they're not famous. On behalf of Jimmy Lai and his family, I thank you again. Let freedom ring.
Thank you, everyone. We will now transition to our wreathlaying ceremony. So if you would please line up beside your wreath, we will transition to that now, and we'll begin online shortly in about 5 minutes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christina Alney, and I'm the Director of Government Relations of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. On behalf of the foundation, I would like to thank all of the embassies and diplomatic delegations for joining us today for this 14th annual Roll Call of Nations Wreathlaying Ceremony to honor the 100 million victims of communism, of some 40 communist regimes over the past century, and the bravery of those who are still resisting communist tyranny today. I would like to especially recognize the ambassadors joining us today. The Ambassador of Bulgaria to the United States, His Excellency Timihir Stoichev. The Ambassador of Estonia to the United States, His Excellency Christian Prik. The Ambassador of Georgia to the United States, His Excellency David Bakradze. The Ambassador of Hungary to the United States, His Excellency Szabolcs Takas. The Ambassador of Latvia to the United States, His Excellency Maris Selga. The Ambassador of Lithuania to the United States, Her Excellency Audra Plepite. The Ambassador of the Slovak Republic to the United States, His Excellency Radovan Javorčík. The Ambassador of Ukraine to the United States, Her Excellency Oksana Markarova, and Representative of Taiwan to the United States, Kim Xiao. It is now my honor to commence the wreathlaying ceremony. Embassies followed by delegations will be called individually forward in alphabetical order to place your wreath in front of the memorial to observe a moment of silence facing your wreath, followed by a photo next to your wreath. The Embassy of the Republic of Albania. The Embassy of Bulgaria. The Embassy. The Embassy of Canada. The Embassy of the Republic of Croatia. The Embassy of the Czech Republic. The Embassy of Estonia. the Embassy of Hungary, the Embassy of Georgia, the Embassy of the Republic of Kosovo, the Embassy of the Republic of Latvia, the Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania, the Embassy of the Republic of Poland, the Embassy of Romania, the Embassy of the Slovak Republic, the Embassy of Ukraine, The delegation of the European Union to the United States. The Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in the United States. The Office of Tibet. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the diplomatic wreath-laying portion of the program. Thank you once again on behalf of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation to all of the embassies and delegations for participating. I will now turn the podium over to my colleague, Ken Pope, Director of Academic Programs at the Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. It's my privilege to thank and recognize other organizations who are doing this work today. Each one of these organizations individually. The Albanian American Council, the Albanian American Freedom House, American Cold War Veterans, American Museum of People Diaspora, the Carnegie Family Foundation, in honor of Wreathlaying Ceremony, their winner, People SOS, Campaign for Leaders, Center for Free Cuba, Center for Liberty and Reunification, Citizens Power Initiative for China, the Citizens Coalition for Human Rights of North Korean Refugees, Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, the Congress of World Hmong People, Dialogue China, Federation of North Korean Defectors Organizations, Congress for Free Russia Foundation, Friends of Taliban, Friends of the Imperial City of Great, Coalición Pero Profecía Americana, Victims of Communism, Hungarian American Coalition, International Campaign for Tibet, Aloya Family Semblak of Albania, Korean CPAC, Korean Siam School for North Korean Defector Children, the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice, the North Korean Freedom Coalition, One Korea Network, the Pan-Albanian Federation for America, Doctrine, BC chapter, Pan-Albanian Federation for America, Doctrine of Earth, in memory of all the Albanian victims of communism. Send rights and information directly to North Korean People Project, Tibet Action Institute, U.S. Ukraine Foundation, Union for Lao Nation and Study and Research Center for Laos and Asia, Union of Cuban Former Political Prisoners, United Macedonian Diaspora, Uyghur Human Rights Project, Papua Common Program for Humanity and Diplomacy, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, Vietnam Coalition Against Torture, Women's Rights Without Frontiers, and finally the World Uyghur Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, we just like to thank you again for participating in this amazing event. That concludes this presentation. Thank you again for coming.
As usual, we would ask everyone to gather around the memorial for a group photo at this time.